Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for episode 47 of Cage Side Convos. I'm Rick Huntsman.
This is Quince.
And we're coming to you guys live right now from American Top Team right here in Watertown.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it's right now on the spot or a little bit later on. Big shout out to, of course, American Top Team for being a supporter and a sponsor. Big shout out to Tunes 92.5 for supporting and for sponsoring. And of course, you know, I'm here representing Hold Down Upstate, which you can find on Facebook all day, every day, and day one as well.
Yeah, day one, man. Kind of interesting how all that's evolved, man. Because when we first started, that's pretty much all we talked about was, you know, day one, Hold Down Upstate, and a lot of community involvement and everything. And actually, you were just sharing some pretty cool stuff with me about what Hold Down Upstate's kind of getting accomplished in the community. You know what I mean? And I actually pretty lately I've kind of backed off the day one stuff. I mean, you know, active on Instagram, and that's where the mindset and everything is. But
Right.
It's funny that, you know, I don't know, just kind of a little trip down memory lane, you know, a year and a half ago or so when we first started this.
And it's constantly changing and adapting, but yet it's still the same in its core sense and core values. And I think when we talk about sponsors or, you know, supporters, you know, we're talking, you know, morally in a sense.
Sure.
You know, in the fact that a lot of what we do in these organizations separately, a lot of what we do in our lives are very community-based and community-driven, and as we growingly understand the importance of our role within that. And, you know, when we come across these other organizations, the conversation's already there, and the language is already there. So you see it start to change and adapt as we link with other people who are just like-minded.
Sure.
And with that, you know, we bring our core values, but then we gain, you know, additional values as far as how everybody else's perspective plays a role into that. So that's why I say constantly changing and adapting, yet still staying the same. It's awesome.
Same but different.
Same but different, man.
So, what's actually kind of cool about this topic is it kind of reverts back to where day one really started. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to talk about the virtue of vice, right? So usually we think of, you know, vice, it's usually virtue versus vice, right? But kind of, you know, a little bit what I want to touch on today, and it's, you know, the pretty common theme through a lot of my notes is what we can learn through our vices, right? And for me, what day one really started with was dealing with alcoholism, dealing with depression, and how those two things were linked together, right? And the day one mindset comes from, you know, approach every day like it's the only day that you have, you know. And you talk to anybody who's ever done Alcoholics Anonymous or any recovery programs and stuff, that's a lot of what recovering addicts focus on. I was able to use that to deal with, you know, my depression and the subsequent anxiety that went through, you know, with all of that. But, you know, kind of everything comes a little bit full circle, right?
Yeah.
So I always think it's kind of funny where this topic started for me, and I'll share that, and then we'll just kind of run from there. Is I actually started thinking about the virtuousness of having vice in your life when I was looking at professional athletes, and the injury rate of professional athletes is very, very high. It seems every single season, like all-star caliber athletes are getting hurt. And I started, you know, kind of wondering why that is, and a lot of it has to do with sports medicine or like early specialization in athletes as kids. That increases the injury rate later in life and all this other stuff. But one thing that I started thinking of is you look at guys like Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle and like old world, early 1900s athletes, and these guys were booze hounds. They smoked cigars while they were playing, chewing tobacco. They fucking drank heavily, you know. And pitchers in the early 1900s were pitching 9-inning games all the time. You didn't have relief pitchers, closing pitchers and all that. You just had, that was your pitcher for the day. These guys would pitch, 4 games a week and throw their arms out, and guys would play hurt all the time and stuff. And comically, in my mind, to kind of get back around to the initial starting point of this, is I thought, well, that's the reason they could play so hard, is because they partied hard. You know what I mean? And they drank. They didn't really take care of their bodies, but they were just involved in life, and they had that vice. And I think a lot of, obviously professional athletes now still party, and you see
They do?
shit. Just,
Oh, Lord.
well, usually when they do, it hits the headlines. There's all kinds of accusations from the women they philander with, and
Sure.
behind the scenes and stuff. But now that athletes are driven to be so pristine and treat their bodies like finely tuned machines and stuff, and their vice is a very dirty word, alcoholism and drug abuse and all that stuff. And obviously it happens. I'm not promoting. We'll fine tune what I'm saying right now a little bit later. I'm just going to let that one run. So do drugs, drink hard if you want to be a professional athlete with longevity. But that seemed to be, for me, the funniest thing, that the difference, between 100 years ago and now, is that you never heard about athletes getting injured back then, but obviously, they were just getting drunk and you didn't fucking think about it, So,
Sure. There's no social media.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. So the vice, kind of being there and tempering this hardcore discipline that's drilled into people at such a young age. You know what I mean? When you're 12 years old, you're told if you steer from this path at all, you're fucked up and you're never gonna make it big.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas at a certain point, I think there's got to be a sweet spot between discipline and vice. You have to pepper that in if you want to have longevity. If you want to have the mental health on it, and physical health too.
Yeah.
Because
I think the whole, it's just a super interesting take.
yeah,
The virtue of vice.
it is.
Because
Yes, you're right. No.
it's super interesting take because it's certainly not how I would describe it. Virtue and vice being, honestly, complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So
Right.
it's almost an oxymoron there. But you talk about being able to learn self through vice.
Sure.
And that I agree with 100%. Because, so what I did first, I was thinking about, I of course looked up vice, which of course even by definition is something negative. It's a negative like character trait or a negative thing that the activity that somebody is involved in. And so I broke that down a little bit, and I was thinking vice versus leisure. Because on the surface they seem very similar as far as in characteristic in regards to activities.
Right.
So, say if it's smoking or drinking, gambling, experiencing with drugs, chasing women or the opposite sex, these all give they release what is it? Serotonin. Feel good things. They're enjoyable to do as far as just being human, and we call it just living a little bit.
Sure.
Think about, you raised the example with athletes now who have a very stringent work process and demands of them from a very young age, and so that's all they're doing. In the same regard, think of, say, parents or a school system that keeps kids very aligned. You know what I mean? Yeah. Strict rules and regulations as they grow up. And then what happens when you go to college?
Right.
Not guaranteed, but now you don't know how to, people kind of lose their shit a little bit because you don't know how to self-regulate, and you don't know how to cope in these ways and balance this sort of stuff. So I agree 100% with that. And back to the leisure versus vice, leisure being something that we do in our free time, something that's enjoyable, but as it refers to vice, because there are a lot of the same things, vice to me seems to be something that we do end up doing out of compulsion. And
so I think I think one of the biggest things So to differentiate between leisure and vice is because if you look at, you have to have a disciplined mindset. Ideally, we have a disciplined mindset, right? We have discipline in our daily lives, but you just talked about the overindulgence of discipline, right? So the vice of discipline, right? So the virtue of vice, and then we have the vice of discipline, which discipline is always regarded as a strong attribute, right? So a lot of times you look at religious institutes for schooling and stuff like that are typically very, very rigid, and like you said, and the students get released in the free world, and then they lose their shit. But I think that the difference between leisure and vice is leisure is instilled in the discipline program, right? Whereas vice is disruptive of discipline. So any good training regimen you put yourself in has rest incorporated into it. You train for 6 days, you rest for 1, or you train for 3 days, you rest for 1, train for 2 days, rest for 1. You know what I mean? There's always rest implemented in there. There's leisure time incorporated to any structured, disciplined lifestyle, right? Because if you just go hard 24 hours a day, you break down. And then when you do have the opportunity to indulge in leisure or vice, it becomes consuming, right? So I think that maybe the difference between leisure and vice would be disruptive of a disciplined mindset.
Agree completely, because I was speaking of compulsion before,
right?
And I think that compulsion, that compulsive nature, is the breakdown of the traits that we hold in such high regard, which is self-control and discipline and willpower. So without those being the glue that hold together all of these other aspects that allow us to continue to move forward.
Right.
And if we're losing that breakdown, that glue of discipline and self-control, we're no longer moving forward. And I think that's when it becomes a vice, because like you said, it's disruptive to forward progress. It's disruptive to quality of life.
Yeah.
And in that regard, I think there's a lot to be learned, because you realize that what is done at first in leisure and then compulsively, which causes that breakdown, you realize that you're doing, and this varies from individual to individual as far as how we define vices and why we use them compulsively. But oftentimes they are coping mechanisms.
Sure.
They're coping mechanisms for usually underutilized or underdeveloped skills, whether it's life skills, whether it's social skills, or what have you. You know, the range goes from, like, how many times are people like uncomfortable in social situations, and they have any level of social anxiety. So if they have a couple drinks, they can better, regulate the self within a crowd of people.
Right.
And that's human.
Yeah.
That's human. But if you don't address the anxiety, why this might be an issue, or maybe if you don't like confrontation,
sure,
or certain fears, if you don't address these core issues, then these vices that we use to cope, we continue to use, and then we become dependent on.
Yeah. So that one of the notes I wrote down was conquering vice requires conquering your ego, right? So dealing with being in a social situation and being uncomfortable, so the way ego weighs in on that, right, is that we have a fear of looking stupid. We have a fear of being perceived as being awkward. So we mask up that fear. We protect our ego. We protect our fears, right? We keep ourselves away from that fear by having a couple drinks, and then you click that inhibition off, and you chemically reduce your ego for a little while, because then you don't care about looking stupid, right? But it's an avoidance. And so in order to understand that vice, and so again, the reason I chose virtue of vice is because we can study ourselves through the vices that we choose, understand kind of exactly what you're saying. Why do we choose this vice? Or when do we choose it, right? Why do we choose it? How did we get to the point where this went from a leisure activity to a vice? And you know, how can we challenge our ego? Can we shut our ego off, get rid of this vice, and then re-enter the world as a stronger individual, you know, without need for the crutch? It's hard.
It's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's, at times, you know, being the ability to be honest with our shortcomings.
Yeah.
I don't know anything more difficult than that. It's very, it leaves us very vulnerable. And I think those same shortcomings are what, you know, kind of throws us off. Say it's in social situations. Is that a battery thing?
No, that's fine.
That's fine.
20% battery is fine. It'll get us through.
Is that?
That's probably fine. That
should be okay. We'll just talk really fast like this.
Yeah.
But in that sense, there's so much to be learned.
Yeah.
There's so much to be learned. It was kind of what was I talking about before? The fact that it's difficult.
Yeah.
To be honest with self about our shortcomings.
Yeah.
One of the most difficult things. But it's essential.
Right.
And it's essential. And a lot of us don't learn that until, you know, we're hitting rock bottom with some of these vices.
Right.
You know, because as we continue with a vice, it starts to not only become a crutch, but, you know, it's how we speak of addiction.
Sure.
Because these vices you know, these vices can end up changing our internal chemistry.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which then it becomes even harder to get out of them and reverse that. But usually when we hit rock bottom and we have to come face to face and come to terms with all of these things that we're talking about now that we could have and should have learned prior to.
Yeah.
About how we got it, why we use this vice, whether this particular vice, when we use it.
Yeah.
That's usually the point in time in which we can kind of, we're forced to have those difficult conversations or reflections.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the definitions of vice, just define it as a bad habit.
Right.
Okay? So obviously excessively drinking daily is a bad habit, right? So smoking is a bad habit, right? What about biting your fingernails? If people would classify that as a bad habit, right? But if I say biting my fingernails is my vice, that doesn't sit right, does it? Doesn't quite seem.
No, I have that.
Right?
Yeah.
But go ahead. We'll let you get into whatever's cracking you up.
No,
in a second.
I'd rather not.
But so biting your nails or something, you know, they say, okay, well that's by, you know, Webster Merriam definition, it's a vice. But is it really though? Because to a certain extent, I mean, if you bite your fingernails out of being nervous, or I mean, for me, I'll bite my fingernails when, say, you know, I'm on the drive home and I notice they're getting long, and I'll just nip them off real quick, right? So sure, it's a bad habit, but I think what really defines something as becoming a vice is whether if we're using it for avoidance or if we're doing it out of compulsion and it's destructive.
It's the functionality.
Or out of control, you know what I mean? And then I think that's where vice slips easily into addiction. And it doesn't just have to be chemical. It doesn't have to just be drugs and alcohol and stuff. It can be emotional. It can be emotional vice. You know, one big thing I've been very sensitive to lately, and by that I just mean very aware of when it's going on, is shit talking. Is when people have a need to either speak illy of people or when they frame everything in a negative mindset. Right. And that, I think, is a vice.
Sure.
Because just like a chemical addiction, they use it for avoidance. They're not having conversations with themselves, or it's easy to shed a negative light on somebody else to take that light away from you, right? And it's a vice because it's not only destructive to, you know, to the person that's talking, but it's mean and it's destructive to other people.
Sure.
You know, or if you everybody knows somebody who's negative about everything. How's your day? Oh, well, these are the 10 things that are going wrong today.
Right.
And it's, we talked a while, you were using the phrase energy vampires, and we talked a few months ago about energy. And you start draining that life out of other people by speaking like that. And it's a vice, and it's destructive. It's avoidant behavior, and it's damaging to yourself, and it's damaging to other people around you.
Yeah.
And I think, again, really that vice, to define for ourselves whether it's a vice or it's a bad habit or it's a weird, idiosyncrasy of our personality, you know what I mean?
Right.
But that challenges us to define what's a vice for us and decide if it's something we want to conquer or put ourselves into a situation where we have the strength to conquer it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point, is that functionality is what separates a leisure activity from a vice.
Sure.
As far as what we do in our spare time, which oftentimes leads to moderation.
Sure.
And as it changes, if the functionality now is that avoidance of what we're trying to cover up or those shortcomings of ourselves, to where it then becomes compulsive and things of that nature. So, when you were talking about, it could be something as I don't want to say as little or menial as biting nails.
Right.
And I started laughing because that scene from you ever see Half Baked?
Oh, yeah.
When he's up, he stands up, maybe it's like a AA or something like that, and he says, I'm Dave Chappelle, and I smoke weed.
Yeah.
And someone in the back yells, look, smoke weed.
Bob Seger.
Yeah. I used to
or Bob Saget.
cocaine.
Bob Seger.
Bob Saget, yeah.
Bob Saget,
so that's why I was laughing. And
I hope everybody who watches this knows exactly what I'm saying, because you edit it for decency's sake. But oh man,
too funny. So I was thinking about, you're up there saying, "Yeah, I bite my nails, compulsively." You ever? So I had to at least frame the reference so I didn't look like a crazy person.
If you guys haven't, go fucking watch that movie. God damn it, that's awesome.
But it is, so we're talking about from moderation to compulsiveness.
Sure.
And
sick reference, dude.
Great. Fuck, that's shit. That's all I had.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. We're shutting it down.
What was the last thing that you were?
I don't even know now.
Jeez.
Essentially, how we can challenge ourselves to examine our vices, or examine, is it a bad habit? How do we define it? And again, I feel like ego and vice coexist, because if you sugarcoat things for yourself and you say, well, it's not a vice because I have it under control, it's not an addiction because I have it under control, that's protecting your ego, because nobody wants to admit when they're wrong.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And that's, I mean, right or wrong, if you want to conquer the vice, you have to challenge that. You have to define it as such. You have to. Vice feels like a weakness. Saying this is my vice,
right,
is saying this is what I'm weak to. This is the chink in my armor, and you have to admit that you're vulnerable, and you have to challenge yourself to change. And it's not easy, and it's not comfortable. And there are all kinds of vices we can choose to avoid having to deal with that conversation as well.
So the vice itself, the use of the vice compulsively, is a weakness. The working to understand the vice can be a strength in that sense.
Absolutely.
So that's where the vice becomes a strength.
That's where the virtuous aspect of it, is from. It's not necessarily that vice provides us virtue, but it's challenging ourselves to understand it that becomes a virtuous trait.
Correct. Correct. Now, how can we, before it becomes a vice, there's no way to correct a vice before it becomes a vice. So once it becomes a vice, you were talking a little bit about how we use that to strengthen our discipline through that vice. Right. So that's something that I was having trouble wrapping my mind around.
Right.
So because oftentimes something becomes a vice, and now I don't want to blend it too much with vice and addiction.
Sure.
Are you keeping those two separate?
Yeah. So I think that leisure can lead to a habit, can lead to vice, can lead to addiction.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't want to undermine the severity of addiction,
Okay.
and I don't want to just make it sound the same as a vice,
Right.
And so here's kind of where I think vice can be an okay thing, right? So we talked about the difference between vice and leisure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in your leisure time, in your allotted leisure time, in your whole discipline, schedule, and regimen, right? In your allotted leisure time, if you have something that you know can get easily out of hand, that has been addiction before, for me, it was alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In my leisure time, sometimes I will drink, you know? And sometimes there will be a weekend where I'll say, I'm going to fucking send it this weekend. And it's just going to be drinking and the bad food that goes with it and just the physical misery that accompanies it. And I accept that that's going to be, because the reality of the situation for me in examining my addiction, examining my vice, examining my habits and stuff, was that I love being drunk. And I loved partying and everything that went with it, and being up until 4 a.m. And I liked it when I did. And I did it for the pretty significant part of a decade. You know, from probably the time I was about 19 until late 20s. You know, and so I mean every bit of a decade, almost the entire time I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. You know, but I understand. Once I kind of came out of that, and I was sober for a year, and I really examined the control that I let that have over my life. I know I define it as a vice for me because I understand the capacity for it to get out of control. And being in a disciplined mindset now and understanding that as a weakness, when I allow myself the time to do it, I understand that I'm going to do it for that little bit of time, and then I'm going to stop doing it, because I know if I extend my boundaries that I've set for myself, that it's going to become problematic. So I can use this vice, or essentially my self-discovery that I endured through realizing it as an addiction and realizing it as a vice, but I can incorporate that and reinforce my discipline too. Right? So I say, okay, well, Saturday night we're going over to my friend's house, we're going to watch the fights, I'm going to have some drinks, and I try not to limit myself to how many drinks I'm going to have, because I found through trial and error that if I set a number on it, that's when I tend to exceed it. So I just say, I'm going to have some drinks, and whatever goes with it, goes with it. I'm going to sneeze real quick. Maybe. Nope. Not going to have
Psych
it.
yourself out. Oh, there it goes.
See, same thing as setting a number on the drinks. If I say I'm going to sneeze, then it's not going to happen.
Right.
But knowing that, so that's where it stays as leisure time. So you can indulge in vice in your leisure time, but I think vice, for it to really be a vice and for it to be more than a bad habit, it has to be something that could easily get out of control and can easily consume you. And that's why vice is regarded as being so dangerous.
Yeah.
And
I find that when trying to differentiate between the two, because like we said, they look the same on the surface.
Sure.
I find often with vice, after doing it, or consuming it, or what have you, there is a cycle that comes after that, of like guilt and shame and blame that one goes through, that one doesn't necessarily go through when done in leisure time. So exactly what you're talking about. You could be doing the same thing that you did in the 20s. When you say, okay, I'm going to use this time, this weekend, to indulge. And you might feel like shit waking up on Sunday morning. But certainly the guilt is lessened, when the discipline is there and worked on, where now Sunday you're done. Monday back to work, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Exactly. Yeah, because there's nothing shameful in enjoying life. There's nothing shameful in enjoying a drink or enjoying rich food or enjoying, gambling or, any of these things that are defined as vice. There's no shame in it.
In and of themselves.
Right. As long as the shame comes from the lack of self-control. Actually, my sister Cassie just chimed in and said, I admire your self-control. And Cass, thank you very much. That means quite a bit. So thank you for listening, but two, thank you for chiming in, and then always for the kind words. So,
Awesome.
yeah. So anyways, but yeah, thanks for the love, little sis.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to talking about self-control.
Self-control.
Yeah, but again, the discipline, there's discipline in leisure, there's discipline in vice, there's discipline in habits, but it all comes from, challenging yourself to understand it. And I mean, for me, the discipline was, for a while, I think it was like 13 months I was sober, and I think, like, I didn't fucking count. I know that's what it was. But the discipline was knowing that I did not have the discipline to control it. And then when I eased back into it, knowing that if I slip up again, and if it does get to a point where it's consuming me, I know for sure I can walk away from it. And if I have to walk away from it again, it'll be forever.
Right.
And I know, I'm confident in that resolve. So now I maybe drink once or twice a month maybe, but it's fallen out of its habit with me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I'm not as enamored with that lifestyle. And I think what happened was, through backing off from the alcohol, is I realized how much of a positive impact I can have on the world around me when I'm sober, when I'm clear-headed, when I'm involved in what's going on. And as much as I love partying, as much as I love being drunk, now that I realize that I can serve a higher purpose, I can better serve the people around me through sobriety, the drinking has lost its allure.
Right.
I would still classify it as a vice, because I do believe that once you're an addict, you're always an addict, right? Once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. So it's still a vice, but it doesn't consume me anymore.
Right.
I don't wake up hungover and then want to drink, whether it's from the physical turmoil of it, or, like you said, the shame or the blame. If I feel bad mentally, I'm just going to keep drinking, and that'll go away, because it always does. But it's all, again, the virtue of it was challenging myself and holding myself accountable. And I had to admit that I was an alcoholic, and that hurt my ego, because that's an extreme weakness, and that's what, from talking to people that have gone through, that are dealing with alcoholism, and people that have dealt with addiction and stuff, and it's the same thing. It's shameful, and you feel weak.
Yeah.
But that reality is, you're human. You're allowed to make mistakes.
Very human. And ego plays such a huge role in it, as well as true education, of self and things of this nature. I remember when I was very young, and this was growing up, knowing, I knew very well that we had addiction on both sides of the family, but more so on my father's side. And knowing that, I mean, I would drink and I would smoke, but I remember the first time that, everyone was doing coke, and I was like, nah. In my head, I'm like, nah, I know it runs through my family. I know my father had, severe addiction with that. So I'm like, I'm not gonna fuck with it. And then, then I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna let that decide how. I know it's addictive, and I know it's running. So I'm not gonna let that decide my fate, because I am me. I'm.
Yep.
So, and then that was, that's how I ended up talking myself into doing it.
Yeah.
Thinking that I would be above the effects of it, and it was a long road of just like shit, the choices and lifestyles, and that it helped me to understand that it wasn't so much as the chemical change or the drug itself, but it was these shortcomings that we're talking about. This is the part that I didn't know, about the drug itself.
Yeah.
Like why it hooks, like why you're like, oh, fuck, this is the one, this is it.
Yeah.
It's not the drug, it's what it's covering.
Yeah.
And that I had to learn and re-understand and start to correct before I could break the chains easily. So where you say, once an addict, always an addict, I understand that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can start to understand that, whether we're talking, the chemistry,
Yeah.
or whether we're talking, mentally or whatever it may be. But I do believe that people can work toward and better themselves in ways that it makes it easier to detach from.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So for me, I don't want to say that I've cured my alcoholism.
Right.
You know, I haven't fallen victim to any binges or anything like that since I came out of my sobriety. You know, so by all measurable metrics, yes, I'm not an alcoholic anymore.
Right.
But having that mindset and understanding that there is a weakness in me that is prone to that. I would love to say yes, I'm a completely different person than I was,
Right.
you know, 3 years ago when I went through all this. But the reality is, I'm human and I'm as fallible as everybody else. So saying yes, I am an alcoholic still keeps me in the mindset of constantly working on what I'm going through.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Appreciating being detached from that lifestyle, of all of the things that you talk about, appreciating all the self-work that went into it, appreciating the people in my life that, you know, helped me in whatever capacity they helped me to get to the point that I am now, you know, still framing myself, and it keeps me from letting my ego take control too, and saying, yes, I'm an alcoholic still, even though I drank maybe 5 or 6 drinks on Saturday night. We were at Eddie's house for his birthday, you know, and that's it. That's I think all I've drank this month.
Right.
You know, I had a couple drinks on New Year's Eve. You know, so that's twice in the month of January that I've had drinks, I think.
Right.
So that, you know, for most people that doesn't define an alcoholic.
Sure.
You know, but knowing myself,
Yep.
knowing my you know, propensity for falling victim to vice,
Yep.
you know, and saying, okay, this is what, you know, the potential is if I don't keep it in the forefront of my mind that it's a possibility.
Absolutely. 100% agree and understand. And, you know, in that respect, owe a lot to my vices. Owe a lot to my vices. Because it wasn't just one thing. I had the potential to make any one thing a vice.
Yeah.
Because they were covering up, you know, often similar shortcomings or similar.
So I'm going to jump in real quick with this definition of vice.
Okay.
Amongst the other ones, and initially it didn't seem like it would fit, but so vice, like a vice president, you know, is acting as a deputy or substitute for.
Interesting.
Acting as a substitute for.
Okay.
So taking it out of the technical definition of what that means, you know what I mean? The vice sheriff, the vice, you know, fucking president, the vice president, or vice like CEO, whatever, all that other shit, you know, assistant to the whoever, but substituting in. So exactly like you're saying, vice, when we look at it as far as chemical addiction and stuff, is substituting for a shortcoming.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very profound way to kind of measure vice as well.
Sure.
So is it leisure activity, bad habit, or is it vice? Is it substituting? Is it covering up for a weakness? Is it in place of something that we're lacking? You know, and I think the way that you've been framing it and stuff fits neatly into that definition.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. No, good point. You know, vice president, I never questioned what that was, why that term was used in that way, because the usual definitions are, the definition I found was, you know, immoral or wicked behavior, you know, or a weakness in character.
Weakness of character, yeah.
But, you know, in that weakness in character, breaking that down into a substitute for something else. Yeah, no, I think that's perfect.
Absolutely.
I think that's perfect.
I like that the immoral or wicked behavior. A quote I found from Socrates was to accustom your body to be the servant of your mind. Right. So instead of the other way around, your mind being the servant of your body. Right. Your body is the servant of your mind. So we condition ourselves through labor, through physical training, through you know and I've been talking a lot about breath work and stuff like that, right? But everything that our body does is to serve increasing the fortitude of our mind, right? So kind of following that logic, it becomes an immoral or wicked behavior to treat your body poorly, because your body is supposed to be serving to heighten your mind.
Sure.
Right? So when you're using substances and you're physically abusing your body, or you're not training, or you're overindulging in food or whatever, if you're in any way allowing or forcing your body to become weak, or you're doing your mind a disservice. You're treating yourself immorally, right? So it's immoral to treat your body poorly.
Okay.
Right? Now, that's not saying that having a drink occasionally, that occasionally putting your body through stressors is bad. I mean, really, that's what strength training is. You stress your body and then it becomes stronger. If you have a drink that's providing a temporary stress to your body, I'm not saying that drinking is going to increase your fortitude or anything like that, but I mean, it increases your drinking tolerance, right? But so these occasional stressors, but saying that we're going to be disciplined, we drink, and then this night we drink, and then the next day we don't, that increases the strength of our mind. You know what I mean? So as long as we're not damaging our body to the point that our mind suffers for it, that we suffer shame or guilt, right?
Yeah. And a couple things. Just even the last thing you said, in regards to having a couple drinks when we say we're going to, and having that help to increase our discipline or willpower, but I think it also has to do with the time before that, prior to, that we're not.
Right.
We're not indulging or overindulging.
Right.
But yeah, I think vice has always been synonymous with sin.
Yes.
For those very reasons. As far as the body is the temple, and oftentimes we talk about external versus internal stimuli.
Sure.
And I think that would be the difference. They say people, something of the flesh. People that become addicted to things of the flesh. These outside stimulations, opposed to what builds and strengthens the mind, and doing it the other way around. Yeah. So it makes perfect sense, and we are by no means professionals.
Yeah.
We're by no means professionals. But we do speak from our own experience. People have their own experience, in which we're always trying to learn from. Yeah. And I think oftentimes we try to take these negativisms that we've experienced, both individual levels, and try and understand how we can rework a weakness so it becomes a strength.
Yeah.
So it could help better us every day, because it's easy to utilize a strength to be better.
Sure.
But as they say, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and that could even be within the self. It doesn't matter how much I'm gaining in the gym. If I don't educate myself or read shit outside of that, if I don't do anything else, or if my diet sucks, we are working to be as well-rounded as possible, as humanly possible. And one of those ways is taking things like vices and re-understanding them for ourselves, and how they could better promote a better state of mind, quality of life.
Absolutely.
And things of that nature, man. So certainly, whenever you guys are catching up with the convo, let us know your thoughts on what vice means to you, and whether you think it could be used in a positive way to self-benefit, or if you think we're full of shit. Let us know, because it's I'd love to open it up in the conversation. With other people checking in on this.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of the one of the driving forces behind us choosing this format. Going live on Facebook, and obviously, the times that we choose and stuff are going to vary on who's around. But being able to have people chime in and challenge us, because it's a conversation at the end of it. You know what I mean? As this is for us to flesh out our ideas, to present them, you know, to the modern Stoa, you know,
Right.
and but love the challenge or you know, whether it makes sense to you, what's your interpretation of what you're saying, or like you said, Quince, if we're full of shit, challenge us, and then
Right.
that gives us the opportunity to go back and reevaluate. You know, are we as strong in our beliefs as we thought, or did we miss something?
Right.
You know, it's just all part of the process, man.
It's all part of the process.
And like kind of like you said, we're by no means, you know, completely virtuous beings at all, and prone to our vices, absolutely. And this over the past couple of weeks, I've been contemplating this topic. The one thing I just kind of stumbled on in my mind was anything outside of discipline is vice. So as long as it's the leisure activity we built into our discipline schedule, it's fine.
Right.
But for me, like I've been getting horrible with my diet and thinking about the vice of overindulgence. Like I shouldn't be indulging every single day. I don't need to indulge every single day. It's not adding value to my life. So even just having this as in the forefront of my mind for contemplation has challenged me to reevaluate my ability to be disciplined, my strength and everything, you know. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, please weigh in.
Yeah.
You know, if you have anything, I mean, I think most of the people that watch know how to get in touch with us directly. So if you want to say something scathing and you don't want to do it on a public forum, more than welcome to message us privately.
Sure.
And then we're gonna screenshot it and put it on Facebook.
Full blast. Yeah, but either way, man, I don't think we have that thin of skin. But just before we get out from the topic, the last thing you were saying, you know, we are prone to our vices.
Sure.
But the fact that even within that discipline, and can become a vice at times.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about, you know, utilizing self-help books, utilizing, you know, self-help podcasts or those YouTube videos for motivation, and you know, getting caught sometimes in doing in learning more than we're actually doing.
Yeah.
And so therefore that in which started as being something that is beneficial becomes that no more.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just a real good example of kind of what we mean, understanding why it is we're going to those self-help books.
Yeah.
And understanding that we actually have to do the work.
Are we actually learning anything and doing it?
Right.
Or are we just reading it to say that we're reading it because it makes us feel better for reading it?
Right.
Right? Or watching the videos or whatever.
Sure.
You know.
But yeah, man. Or again, or maybe we're just full of shit.
Maybe. Who knows?
Tune in next week.
Yeah. Next week to find out more. Sure. Awesome, man.
Cool.
Yeah, Quince, man, as always, thank you for your time, brother. It's been a blast.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're checking us out on YouTube, please don't be bashful. Hit the like button. Give us a share. Throw some comments on here. If you like, dislike it. You know, let us know.
All right. Appreciate you. Until next time.